I think about modes, these ones, in a way that I haven't ever seen talked about before. Now, maybe somebody has organized the modes like this before and I simply haven't seen it, but when I took college music theory courses, I was taught in a way that wasn't anything like this system that I've developed. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I discovered this ordering, some cool things you can do with it, and why I prefer it to the other, more traditional ways of teaching modes. So let's jump right in. Let me set the stage. It was sometime in 2020, probably, not exactly sure when, but I'm pretty sure I was sitting at this piano and I was playing around with the circle of fifths. Right there, I noticed something. If you take all those notes and collapse them down into one octave, keeping the bottom note as the bottom note, you get the pentatonic scale. So that's already pretty interesting. The perfect fifth is arguably the most basic and important interval, especially in Western music, and it's the first non-octave interval that shows up in the harmonic series, which is the thing that shows up in the frequency profile of any tone that isn't a sine wave. The harmonic series is also a mathematical idea, and I may end up making a video about it on this channel and musical applications of it, but for now, go watch Andrew Huang's video on it. It's pretty good. So anyway, the perfect fifth is a really important interval, and it just so happens that when you stack 5 of them on top of each other, you get the pentatonic scale, which is the most prevalent scale found in musical cultures across the globe. But what if we kept going? Adding another fifth gives us B, which among all the other notes is part of the C major scale. We only need one more note to complete that scale, an F, so let's go up a fifth from B and F sharp. This gives us Lydian, rather than Ionian, which is major. Why? We were so close to having this incredibly procedural and mathematical explanation for why major is the most common scale in Western music, and we missed it by a half step. And now that final interval is a tritone rather than a fifth. But what if we made that final interval a fifth by moving the B down a half step as well? Well, now we have Mixolydian. We started with Lydian, then we had Ionian, and now we have Mixolydian. Let's keep going. Moving the E down gets us Dorian. Moving the A down gives us Aeolian, or minor. Moving the D down gets us Phrygian. And moving the G down gets us Locrian. Lydian, Ionian, Mixolydian, Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian, and Locrian. At that time, I had never heard anyone order the modes like that before, and to this day, I still haven't. So what should we call this potentially new ordering? Well, Lydian is often characterized as a very bright mode, and Locrian is often characterized as very dark, and when you play them in that order, they do seem to get gradually darker. So I propose the brightness spectrum of modes. So that's the basic theory behind how I think about modes, but there's still a couple of cool things we can do with this idea. Firstly, you may be wondering, what if you stack fourths, since fourths are just inverted fifths? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you stack fourths, you get Locrian. And if you move each note up a half step at a time, you move in the reverse direction through the spectrum. This supports the idea that stacked fifths are a bright sound and stacked fourths are a dark sound, which is an idea I originally heard from Jacob Collier, but it may have originated elsewhere. The idea that a fourth is an inverted fifth also connects to this theory in a different way. If you invert each mode, or find the negative harmony of each mode, you get the mode that is on the opposite side of the spectrum. Lydian inverts to Locrian, Ionian inverts to Phrygian, Mixolydian inverts to Aeolian, and Dorian inverts to itself. Dorian inverting to itself is actually quite easy to see when you start it on D, which it often is in one of the two traditional ways of thinking about modes. Some of you may also have been thinking, Why did you stop lowering notes at the G? Why not lower the C? Well, initially I didn't because then it would no longer be a C scale, but later on I did and realized that it was now B Lydian. This means that the difference between Lydian and Locrian is either moving all of the notes other than the tonic up and down a half step, or just moving the tonic up and down a half step. This spawned a compositional idea for me that I've been thinking about for years now, but I haven't actually put into a piece of music yet. Here's what that might sound like. This also means that our brightness spectrum could also be thought of as a spectral loop, which switches from darkest to brightest between Locrian and Lydian, where the tonic of the scale changes. This theory can also be used to analyze and explain the quirks of the two primary ways that modes are typically taught. The first way is what I like to call white note modes. This is the one where you start with C major, and then you keep all the notes the same, but you start playing on D, and you get Dorian, and then you start playing on E, and you get Phrygian, and so on. I still have a soft spot for this theory, though I couldn't really tell you why, and I still strongly associate those notes with those modes. But when played in that order on a single tonic, they just kind of seem all over the place to me. Compare that to the brightness spectrum. I think the brightness spectrum just orally makes so much more sense. The brightness spectrum also explains why the white note modes theory feels so disjunct. In the brightness spectrum, the tonics move around in the circle of fifths, so of course when you have them all next to each other in the C major scale, you're going to have varying brightness levels right next to each other. The other primary way of thinking about and teaching modes I don't like as much. Let's call it the quality of the third theory. This organizes all the modes into two groups, major modes and minor modes. This is entirely dependent on the quality of the tonic third. Lydian, Ionian, Mixed Lydian are major modes because their tonic triad is a major chord. Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian, Locrian are minor modes because their tonic triad is minor chord, except for Locrian, which is diminished. I understand why the modes are often taught in this way. Most of Western music is in major, and most of what isn't is in minor. But I personally don't think that's good enough justification to teach the modes this way. First, the groups are unequally sized, which just kind of bothers me. Second, Locrian is kind of included in the minor modes because its tonic third is a minor third, but it's kind of not because its tonic triad is diminished rather than minor, and it's just kind of left in this limbo and forgotten about. I think that's unfair to Locrian. In the brightness spectrum, each mode has its own unique but equal place, and they all live in harmony with each other. Pun absolutely intended. Third, it names the groups after whichever mode in the groups is the most popular, which again I think is unfair to the other modes. I gotta be honest, I did not think I would be personifying abstract collections of intervallically related frequencies in this video, but here we are. I should also mention that I don't really have a problem with hierarchy in music. I'm actually a pretty big fan of it, and I think without it, music just kind of sounds bad. But my mode theory isn't music. It's just a way to think about the modes that feels much better to me. That's the primary reason why I prefer it to other theories. But we're not done ragging on the quality of the third theory just yet. My fourth and final reason for disliking this theory is that it focuses entirely on the tonic third or the tonic triad, even though all of the scale degrees change at some point, and they all change exactly once. To me, it just begs to be organized in a way that recognizes that fact. Once again, I don't really have a real issue with these other theories being taught in music classes because they work just fine, and they were indeed my own introduction to modes. But if you, like me, felt the void caused by a lack of a good theory of modes, I hope I have helped fill that void today. There is one other thing relating to this theory that I want to talk about. You know how a minute ago I mentioned that each scale degree moves exactly once, and this accounts for all the modes? In the brightness spectrum, they each move in a very specific order. But what if they broke free of that? This is the binary scale theory. Each scale degree other than the tonic has two options that are a half step apart. The lower ones we'll call zeros, and the upper ones we'll call ones. With a T representing the tonic, you can pick either a 0 or a 1 for each scale degree, and using the binary counting method, come up with 64 unique 7-note scales. It's not actually always 7, because for 16 of them, scale degrees 4 and 5 share a note, so it's up for debate whether that's really a 7-note scale when there's actually only 6 notes present. I suppose if you explored tuning systems with this theory, you could come up with unique tunings for sharp 4 and flat 5, and then it truly would always be 7-note scales, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. I think of the lower options for each scale degree, the zeros, as the darker options, because all zeros results in Locrian, and I think of the ones, the upper options, as the brighter options, because all ones gives you Lydian. This gives us the ability to organize these 64 scales in terms of brightness. You simply count how many ones a scale has, and that tells you how bright it is. Locrian is the only scale with a brightness of 0. There are 6 scales with a brightness of 1, 16 with a brightness of 2, 19 with a brightness of 3, 15 with a brightness of 4, 6 with a brightness of 5, and Lydian is the only one with a brightness of 6. Oh, look at that. It's the normal distribution. Another thing that's interesting to me about this way of organizing the scales in relation to the brightness spectrum of modes is how seemingly erratic the placement of the rest of the modes is. Once again, Locrian is at position 1, then Phrygian is at 5, then we have a massive gap until Aeolian at 37, then 2 spots over is Dorian at 39, then another big gap to Mixolydian at 55, then right next to that is Ionian at 56. And then, of course, Lydian is up at 64. When I first made this table, I expected them to be more spaced out, but apparently not. That's one of the reasons why I consider this to be its own scale theory, even though it's inspired by my theory of modes. I do have the tables and some of the basic information in this video up on my website, which will be linked below if you're interested in checking that out. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this video. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. If you're going to start thinking about modes this way, or if you're a teacher, if you're going to start teaching modes this way, I think that would be pretty cool. If you make any content of any kind about these theories, I'd love to see it. You can link it in a comment below or send me an email with it if you'd like. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Soli Deo Gloria.